The porcelain dinner plate shattered against the hardwood floor right between my feet, spraying shards of ceramic across the polished oak. Look at this mess. Are you completely blind, Clara? My husband Julian's voice slashed through the heavy air of our Seattle dining room like a rusty blade. He stood over the table, his face flushed red, pointing a trembling finger at a microscopic water ring on the mahogany wood. Beside him, my mother-in-law, Evelyn, slowly set down her silver fork with a deliberate metallic clink. She adjusted her pristine pearl necklace, fixed her cold blue eyes on me, and drew a slow, audible breath. 8 years, Julian, she whispered, her voice dripping with quiet poison that made the room feel 20 degrees colder. 8 years you have been married to a woman who manages millions at her corporate accounting job, yet cannot keep a single glass off your father's heirloom table. She has no delicacy, no femininity, just numbers, receipts, and cold, hard incompetence. I did not scream. I did not flinch. I simply stood motionless in the dim yellow light, feeling the sharp sting of a ceramic fragment that had sliced through my sheer nylon stocking. The faint, copper smell of my own fresh blood, mixed with the heavy scent of roasted garlic and lavender room spray filling the dining space. Before I explain how I ended up standing amidst the broken glass of my own home, holding the secrets that would eventually tear this family's gilded empire to the ground, let me take you back 6 months earlier to the night the frost first settled in my bones. 6 months ago, our 2-story house in the quiet suburbs of Seattle felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum made of silent treatments and unsaid grievances. As a cost accountant for a regional retail logistics enterprise, my days were defined by strict columns, rigid ledgers, and absolute precision. I balanced multi-million-dollar inventory sheets by day, and by night, I returned home to balance every single household expense alone. I paid the mortgage, the utility bills, the grocery runs, and the expensive private school tuition for our 8-year-old daughter, Maya. Julian, a commercial real estate broker whose commission checks had dried up over 2 years ago, spent his days polishing his image. He wore tailored suits paid for by my credit cards, drove a leased luxury sedan maintained by my salary, and spent hours at upscale downtown cafes, networking with wealthy investors who never called him back. Whenever the topic of finances came up, he transformed instantly. He used cold, calculated silence as a weapon. He would walk past me in the hallway as if I were made of glass. He would answer my questions with one-word grunts, turning his back to scroll through his phone, intentionally erasing my presence from the room for days at a time. Evelyn lived 3 blocks away and visited us almost daily under the guise of helping with Maya. In reality, her presence was a daily audit of my shortcomings. She was the prominent president of the local parish charity board, a woman who built her entire social identity around public generosity and community devotion. But behind our closed front door, her words were calculated strikes. She criticized the way I folded the laundry, the tone I used when answering the phone, and the simple, practical dresses I wore to work. To Evelyn, my career was not an asset, it was a character flaw. I was the unemotional calculator who failed to give her son the doting, subservient wife he deserved. The heaviest weight in my chest, however, was not the financial burden or the daily insult. It was the ghost of a baby we never held. 6 months prior to that evening, I had suffered a miscarrying at 11 weeks. My body had given out under the relentless pressure of working 80-hour weeks during the quarterly audit while managing the entire household alone. I remember the sterile, blinding white lights of the emergency room, the rhythmic, hollow beep of the heart monitor, and the sharp, medicinal smell of antiseptic that burned my throat. When the doctor gently broke the news, Julian had not held my hand. He had not pulled me close. He stood near the window, staring out at the rain-slicked parking lot, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "You pushed yourself too hard for a promotion we didn't even need," he had muttered, his voice flat and devoid of warmth. "Your obsession with your job cost us our child, Clara. You destroyed our family's blessing." Evelyn had echoed his words the very next day, bringing over a basket of lilies whose suffocating, sweet fragrance filled the living room. "We won't tell the parish about this, dear," she had whispered, patting my knee with a hand as cold as stone. "People talk. They will say you were too selfish to carry a child to term." I internalized their cruelty. I swallowed the guilt, letting it settle like wet cement in the pit of my stomach. I told myself that if I worked harder, if I stayed up later to clean, if I paid off Julian's credit card balances without complaining, the warmth would return to our home. I believed that my endurance was the glue holding our family together. Every night followed the same exhausting script. After putting Maya to bed, I would sit at the small wooden desk in the corner of our dark kitchen. The only light came from the blue glow of my laptop screen and the amber hum of the street lamp outside the window. I would review our bank statements, crossing off line items, cutting back on my own personal expenses just to ensure Julian never felt the pinch of his failing business. I ate cold leftovers straight from the Tupperware while standing over the sink. I washed the heavy cast iron skillets until my knuckles turned red and raw under the icy tap water. I gave everything I had, believing that sacrifice was the price of peace. The cold rain tapped relentlessly against the windshield of my Honda, casting erratic streaks of light across the steering wheel. I sat in the dark parking lot behind my office building, the engine idling with a low, rhythmic purr. The air inside the car smelled of damp wool, cheap black coffee, and the stale scent of rain-soaked asphalt. Under the warm yellow interior light, 3 crisp white pages rested on my lap. Earlier that afternoon, I had pulled my annual credit report to apply for a small refinancing loan on my car. The screen had flashed a glaring red number, 520. My pulse had spiked instantly. My mind, trained by years of accounting to spot discrepancies in seconds, refused to accept it. I always paid every bill on time. I tracked every dollar. I printed the full file. My fingers trembled as I traced the dense rows of black ink. There was an active business line of credit for $350,000 opened 18 months ago. The primary debtor was a registered entity called the Ross Hope Charity. Attached to the loan was my name, my official signature, and my social security number. Below that entry was another bomb. A second shell company, registered under my name, had defaulted on 3 separate credit accounts. The mailing address was a commercial post office box downtown. I opened my laptop right there in the driver's seat. The bright glare illuminated my pale face in the rearview mirror. My fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing public state business registries and tax databases. Within 30 minutes, the dark puzzle solved itself with terrifying clarity. Sienna, my 25-year-old sister-in-law, was listed as the managing director of Ross Hope Charity. The entity had no real operational expenses, no staff, and no public outreach programs. It existed entirely on paper. The $350,000 credit line had been transferred in large, round installments directly into a personal consulting account owned by Sienna. From there, the money flowed like water. There were wire transfers for luxury fashion boutiques in Paris, high-end cosmetic surgeons in Beverly Hills, and lease payments for a brand-new Mercedes convertible. My breath hitched in my throat. The air in the car felt suddenly thin, as sharp and cold as ice. Sienna had stolen my Social Security card from my desk drawer during one of her casual weekend visits. She had forged my signature on the corporate guarantee forms. I kept digging. I logged into our shared household cloud storage, bypassed checking archived folders that Julian thought he had hidden behind vague labels. My eyes burned as I read through a draft legal document prepared by a local bankruptcy attorney. Julian's name was on the cover page. The strategy was laid out in brutal, systematic detail. The firm advised Julian to file for a complete personal insolvency under my name, citing the failed $350,000 business loan and accumulated credit liabilities. Because the debts were legally attached to my $SS&dollar and my corporate identity, the financial destruction would fall entirely on my shoulders. I would face personal bankruptcy, immediate loss of my accounting license, and potential federal fraud charges for defaulting on a registered charity debt. The final document in the folder made my blood run cold. It was a purchase agreement for a luxury oceanfront condominium in Miami, Florida. The buyer's name was Julian Ross. The co-buyer was a woman named Vanessa Drake, Julian's former real estate colleague. Attached was an escrow receipt showing a cash deposit of $120,000, wired directly from Sienna's consulting account 2 weeks prior. They were not just using my income to survive. They were using my name, my reputation, and my professional identity as a disposable shield. They were preparing to dump millions of dollars of toxic debt onto my back, send me to prison or financial ruin, and walk away to start a new life in Florida with stolen money. My hands froze on the leather steering wheel. The silence inside the car was deafening, broken only by the steady, dull thud of raindrops heavy on the roof. For 8 years, I had believed that if I carried their burdens, they would eventually love me. I had believed that my endurance was proof of my devotion. I had swallowed their insults, accepted their cold shoulder, and blamed myself for the death of my unborn child. I had thought we were a family struggling through hard times. In reality, I was an asset to be liquidated. I was a financial scapegoat being fattened up for the slaughterhouse. I did not break down. I did not scream. I did not shed a single tear. Instead, a strange, crystalline calm settled over my chest. The hot, suffocating guilt that had weighed me down for years evaporated in an instant, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. The naive woman who hoped for a warm word from her husband died, right there in the dark parking lot under the gray Seattle sky. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were wide, clear, and steady. I neatly folded the printed credit reports, placed them inside my leather briefcase, and snapped the brass latch shut with a sharp, decisive click. I stopped asking why they hated me. I stopped asking what I had done wrong to deserve their cold cruelty. Sitting in my idling car under the pouring Seattle rain, I opened a new, encrypted spreadsheet on my laptop and titled it Project Exodus. My mindset transformed in a single, icy second. I refused to play the helpless victim for another day of my life. I realized that my happiness, my freedom, and my daughter's future were entirely my responsibility. If Julian and his family treated our 8-year marriage as a predatory business deal, I would dismantle it with cold, precise, and professional execution. The very next morning, my physical and mental upgrade began. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. every day. In the dim, cool silence of our living room, before anyone else woke up, I unrolled a heavy black rubber mat. I practiced yoga and strength exercises in the dark. I focused on deep, rhythmic breaths, inhaling the fresh morning air coming through the cracked window and exhaling the toxic tension that had been trapped in my neck and shoulders for years. I took control of my appearance. I went to a high-end salon downtown and cut off my long, tangled hair into a sharp, elegant bob that framed my jawline with clean precision. I bought a tailored navy wool suit, crisp, structured, and commanding, using a small private bonus check I had quietly deposited into a separate account. When I looked into the bathroom mirror, I no longer saw a weary, beaten housewife with hollow eyes. I saw a corporate professional in full control of her power. My intellectual focus became laser sharp. I registered for the Certified Public Accountant $CPA board examinations, spending 2 hours every night studying advanced tax law, corporate fraud statutes, and forensic auditing techniques. While Julian slept soundly beside me, believing I was still his obedient, exhausted cash cow, I was mastering the exact legal tools required to destroy his scheme. Then came the execution phase. Over the next 5 months, I acted the part of the meek, submissive wife with terrifying perfection. I cooked dinner every night, I washed the heavy cast-iron skillets, and I spoke in soft, passive tones whenever Evelyn or Julian addressed me. But behind that quiet facade, I was operating as a stealth forensic auditor inside my own home. Every night after the house fell asleep and the street lamps cast amber shadows through the blinds, I worked under the soft glow of a small desk lamp. The only sound in the dark kitchen was the quiet, rapid clicking of my mouse. I systematically extracted digital evidence. I cloned the hard drives of our shared family computer. I took high-resolution, glare-free photographs of Sienna's forged signature forms, cross-referencing them with my genuine handwriting samples from old bank records and tax filings. I downloaded 5 full years of bank statements, tracing every single wire transfer from Ross Hope Charity into Sienna's consulting firm, and then directly into Julian's offshore investment accounts. I built an airtight, undeniable paper trail of tax evasion, identity theft, and corporate embezzlement. Next, I established my strategic legal alliance. I scheduled a confidential, off-the-books meeting with Marcus Vance, a senior trial attorney specializing in white-collar financial crimes and victim protection. His office on the 40th floor smelled of polished mahogany, old leather-bound law books, and rich, bitter espresso. I sat across from him in a high-backed leather chair, unfolded my neatly organized black leather binder, and presented the forensic evidence. I did not shed a single tear. I did not complain about my husband's emotional neglect or my mother-in-law's insults. I presented raw facts, line item numbers, exact dates, bank routing codes, and forged document scans in a calm, steady, and clinical voice. Marcus leaned back in his chair, examined the spreadsheets for 20 minutes in absolute silence, and then looked up at me with deep professional respect in his eyes. "Mrs. Ross," he said, his voice low and resonant, "you haven't just brought me a divorce case. You have handed me a fully documented federal fraud indictment. Your forensic auditing is completely flawless." Together, we submitted a formal, confidential disclosure to the Internal Revenue Service, $IRS, Criminal Investigation Division, and the State Financial Crimes Task Force under the Federal Whistleblower Protection Act. I officially registered as a confidential informant, securing absolute legal immunity for myself while locking the legal trap around Julian, Sienna, and Evelyn. I spent my final weekend building a clean financial foundation. I opened a new bank account in my maiden name at a different banking institution downtown. I transferred my personal savings, rented a private safety deposit box, and updated my life insurance policy to name my 8-year-old daughter, Maya, as the sole beneficiary. On a cold Friday afternoon, I stood inside the quiet vault room of the bank. The air was cool, sterile, and quiet, smelling of metal and crisp paper. I placed the encrypted hard drive containing all the backup files, along with the original forensic binder, inside my heavy steel safety deposit box. I pushed the box into the wall slot and turned the brass key until it locked with a heavy, satisfying clack. I looked at my reflection in the polished steel surface of the vault wall. My eyes were calm, my shoulders were broad, and my breath was steady. The woman who had wept in silence was gone. The architect of my own freedom was ready for the final act. The grand ballroom of the Grand Hyatt Seattle hummed with rich laughter, soft violin music, and the delicate clinking of crystal champagne flutes. Giant crystal chandeliers suspended from the high ceiling showered golden light across 200 distinguished guests. The air smelled heavily of expensive French perfume, roasted prime rib, and fresh white lilies. At the center of the room stood my mother-in-law, Evelyn Ross, wearing a floor-length emerald silk gown and a dazzling diamond necklace. Tonight was the 30th anniversary gala of the parish charity, and Evelyn was moments away from receiving the prestigious Mother of the Year Philanthropy Award. Beside her, my husband Julian looked striking in a tailored black tuxedo, sipping scotch and laughing animatedly with local business leaders. My sister-in-law Sienna wore a backless ruby dress, twirling her glass and showing off her designer diamond bracelets to a group of young socialites. I walked into the ballroom alone. I wore my sharp navy suit, tailored perfectly to my frame, paired with simple silver earrings. My short bob haircut was styled with sleek precision. I carried my slim leather portfolio under my arm. I did not slouch. I did not look at the floor. My stride was steady, measured, and completely devoid of fear. As I neared the stage, Evelyn detached herself from her social circle and stepped directly into my path. Her smile vanished, instantly replaced by a cold, venomous glare. She reached out, her sharp acrylic nails pinching my wrist like a vice. "What are you doing here in that ridiculous work suit, Clara?" she whispered, her voice low, sharp, and dripping with hatred. "Look at you. You look like a hired waitress. If you dare make a scene or embarrass my family tonight, I will make sure Julian divorces you tomorrow. You will lose custody of Maya, and you will leave the city with absolutely nothing." I did not pull my arm away. I did not flinch. I looked directly into her cold blue eyes, feeling the steady, rhythmic beat of my own heart. I leaned in slightly, my voice calm, smooth, and perfectly clear. "Mrs. Ross," I said with a faint, polite smile, "I suggest you save your breath for your acceptance speech." 10 minutes later, the lights dimmed. The chairman of the charity board stepped up to the podium, his voice booming through the speakers. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the main screen for a special tribute video honoring our Mother of the Year, Evelyn Ross." Appreciative applause echoed through the ballroom. Evelyn smoothed her emerald dress, adjusted her posture, and beamed with pride under the spotlight. Julian stood tall, clapping enthusiastically. Then, the tribute video vanished. The large projection screen flickered twice and turned brilliant blue. At my pre-programmed signal, the venue's main media server, loaded with the encrypted file I had uploaded earlier, replaced the family slideshow with a high-resolution scanned document. Silence descended upon the ballroom like a heavy woolen blanket. The music seemed to stop mid-note. Projected across the 20-foot screen was the official banking ledger of the Ross Hope Charity. In bold red ink, the document highlighted a direct $350,000 credit line transfer into Sienna Ross's personal consulting firm. Below it, row after row of forensic data exposed payments for luxury boutiques in Paris, cosmetic surgery clinics in Beverly Hills, and the lease agreement for a luxury Mercedes convertible. Whispers erupted across the room like a sudden swarm of bees. A prominent donor in the second row raised his reading glasses, leaning forward. "Wait, isn't that the housing fund we donated to last summer?" Before Julian could react, the screen shifted to the next slide. It displayed a high-definition scan of the fraudulent loan guarantee bearing my stolen Social Security number, and a side-by-side handwriting analysis proving my signature had been forged by Sienna. Julian's face drained of all color, turning as white as his crisp tuxedo shirt. He sprinted toward the technical booth at the side of the stage, shouting frantically, "Turn it off! Turn that damn thing off right now! It's a glitch!" Suddenly, the ballroom speakers crackled to life. a crystal-clear audio recording filled every corner of the vast room. It was Julian's voice, crisp and unmistakable. "Just let the bankruptcy go through under Clara's name. She's an accountant, so the IRS will blame her for the missing funds anyway. Once the paper trail settles, we'll move into the Miami condo with Vanessa." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Several women covered their mouths in shock. A prominent city council member standing near the bar put down his drink and immediately pulled out his phone to record the screen. Then came a second audio clip. Evelyn's refined, gentle voice resonated through the room, stripped of all its public piety. "Use Clara's SSN for the loan, Sienna. She's too stupid and overworked to check her credit reports. She just sits in the kitchen like a quiet little mouse." Evelyn gasped loudly, staggering backward until her lower back hit the edge of a banquet table. Her face was twisted in sheer horror as the pristine public image she had built over 30 years disintegrated into dust in front of 200 of her most influential peers. Julian turned on his sister on stage, his voice shrill with panic. "You idiot! You kept those audio notes on your tablet. You ruined us. Don't you blame me, Julian." Sienna shrieked, her voice echoing through the microphone she was still holding. Her face was red with fury, tears ruining her heavy mascara. "Mom was the one who told me to take the charity money. She used $50,000 of it for her own facial lifts and designer handbags last month." "Shut your mouth, you foolish girl." Evelyn screamed, her polite facade shattering completely as she lunged toward her daughter. The former model family began screaming, cursing, and physically shoving each other right on top of the illuminated stage. The 200 guests watched in stunned silence as the Ross family tore each other to pieces, exposed by their own greed and recorded words. At that moment, the heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. 4 agents wearing dark suits with gold $IRS criminal investigation badges pinned to their lapels entered the room, flanked by 2 uniformed Seattle police officers. Leading them was attorney Marcus Vance. The lead $IRS agent stepped onto the stage, unholstering a pair of steel handcuffs. "Evelyn Ross, Julian Ross, and Sienna Ross, you are under arrest for federal tax fraud, identity theft, corporate embezzlement, and wire fraud." The metallic click of the handcuffs shutting around Julian's wrists sounded sharply through the quiet room. I stood near the edge of the stage, watching the chaos unfold with absolute emotional detachment. I felt no surge of anger, no desire to gloat, and no urge to scream. I felt only a profound, weightless clarity. I reached into my navy suit pocket and pulled out the pearl bracelet Evelyn had gifted me on my wedding day, the family heirloom she used to remind me of my lower status. I walked over to Evelyn's table, picked up her untouched glass of vintage champagne, and dropped the pearl bracelet inside with a soft plop. I looked Evelyn straight in her trembling eyes. "Fake pearls are just like your family's love, Evelyn," I said softly. "They look shiny from a distance, but inside, they stink of cheap chemicals. Keep it." I turned my back on the flashing cameras, the shouting, and the sobbing of my former family. I walked out of the ballroom with my head held high, my portfolio under my arm, completely free. The fallout was swift, brutal, and absolute. Within 72 hours of the gala, news of the Ross Hope charity scandal dominated local media. Front-page headlines displayed photographs of Evelyn being let out in handcuffs, alongside photos of Julian's face buried in his hands. Federal prosecutors filed formal indictments against Julian, Sienna, and Evelyn for wire fraud, identity theft, tax evasion, and conspiracy. The charity was dissolved by court order, its remaining assets seized to pay restitution to the housing programs they had looted. The bank foreclosed on Julian's luxury sports car, and the oceanfront condo deal in Miami collapsed instantly as lenders froze every connected account. Evelyn's social empire crumbled to dust. Her charity board stripped her of her title, the parish revoked her membership, and her wealthy friends vanished overnight. 3 months later, while out on bail pending trial, Julian showed up at my new independent accounting office downtown. He stood outside my glass door, looking gaunt, disheveled, and completely broken. His once immaculate designer suit was wrinkled and stained. His hair was messy, and his eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark circles of exhaustion. He knocked softly on the glass, holding a single paper cup of lukewarm coffee. When I stepped out into the hallway, he collapsed against the wall, tears streaming down his hollow cheeks. "Clara, please," he sobbed, his voice trembling and raspy. "You have to talk to the prosecutor. Tell them it was all Sienna and my mother. Tell them I didn't know about the SSN theft. I'm facing 5 years in federal prison. Clara, please think about our family. Think about Maya. Give me one more chance to make this right." I stood 3 feet away from him. I wore my tailored gray trousers and a soft silk blouse. I did not feel a surge of anger. I felt no satisfaction in his tears, nor any impulse to kick him while he was down. I felt only a profound, quiet stillness. I turned toward the open door of my office. "Maya," I called gently. "Could you come here for a moment, sweetie?" Maya, now 8 years old, stepped out into the hallway. She wore a bright yellow dress, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She carried her sketchbook, her fingers dusted with blue pastel chalk. Julian dropped to his knees, stretching out his trembling hands toward her. "Maya, baby," he wept, his voice desperate. "Tell your mother to let Daddy come home. Tell her we need to be a family again." Maya stopped beside me. She looked down at the man kneeling on the floor. Her wide brown eyes were clear, calm, and completely unbothered. She did not cry. She did not hide behind my leg. "Dad," Maya said softly, her voice steady and surprisingly mature. "You missed all 4 of my school plays this year because you were too busy at coffee shops. You never came to my soccer games. I don't have time for busy people." She turned back toward my office, leaving Julian frozen on the cold linoleum floor. I looked down at the man who had ignored my pain, blamed me for our lost child, and tried to ruin my life to fund his greed. "Julian," I said, my voice flat and even, "I have forgiven you for what you did. I forgave you, so I wouldn't have to carry the heavy weight of hating you every single morning." Julian looked up, a desperate flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. "You forgive me? Then you'll drop the civil suit? You'll let me come back?" I shook my head slowly, my expression serene and unbreakable. "Forgiveness is something I gave myself to heal my own heart," I said, every word crisp and clear. "It is not an invitation for you to walk back into my life. Forgiveness does not mean restored access. I spent 8 long years building a key to lock the door against your cruelty. I will never open it again." I stepped back inside my office. "You are Maya's father on a birth certificate," I added softly, "but in my life, you are simply a lesson that I have paid for in full." I clicked the glass door shut, turned the lock with a firm snap, and drew the white linen shade down, blocking him out forever. 6 months after the trial ended, my life looked entirely different. I established a nonprofit financial and legal advisory clinic downtown, dedicated to helping women who had suffered identity theft, financial abuse, and coercive debt in toxic marriages. My story has become a beacon of hope for hundreds of women across the state. With my newly earned $CPA credentials and the money recovered from my civil settlements, I built a thriving practice rooted in integrity, transparency, and purpose. I bought a small, beautiful craftsman cottage, sitting high on a green hill overlooking Puget Sound. It had a wide wooden porch, white trim, and a small garden filled with blooming lavender, hydrangeas, and fresh mint. The air here was sweet, crisp, and salty, carried by the cool breeze coming off the open ocean water. It was late Saturday afternoon, the golden hour. The low summer sun cast a warm, radiant amber light across the entire landscape. The sky glowed in soft shades of honey gold, blush pink, and deep violet. The quiet waves of the Sound glistened like millions of crushed diamonds beneath the sunlight. I stood on the quiet wooden deck, holding a warm ceramic mug of chamomile tea in both hands. The steam drifted lazily into the cool air, carrying the subtle, soothing scent of dried flowers and honey. I wore a comfortable, oversized cream, knit sweater and linen trousers. My short bob haircut caught the golden breeze, blowing softly against my cheeks. I took a deep, slow breath, filling my lungs with clean, cold air. For 8 long years, my chest had felt tight, squeezed by a heavy, suffocating band of anxiety, guilt, and fear. Every breath I took in my old house had tasted of stale tension and unsaid grievances. Now, my heart felt light, spacious, and completely unburdened. Out in the front yard, Maya was sitting on a wooden bench beneath a blooming apple tree. She wore a bright red sweater, her dark hair glowing like polished mahogany under the amber sunlight. She was dipping a paintbrush into a small cup of water, painting vibrant blue and yellow flowers onto a large wooden birdhouse. Her soft, clear laughter echoed across the quiet lawn as a small robin landed on a low branch above her head. I leaned against the smooth wooden porch railing and watched my daughter. I smiled, a genuine, effortless smile that reached all the way to my eyes. I felt no lingering anger toward Julian. I felt no bitterness toward Evelyn or Sienna. The courtroom battles, the public scandal, the fake pearl bracelet, and the bitter memories had all faded into distant background noise. They no longer held any power over my mind. Their choices had defined their downfall. My choices had defined my freedom. Revenge had never been my goal. Survival had been the catalyst, but self-love had been the destination. I had stopped waiting for someone to save me, stopped wishing for an apology that would never come, and taken full ownership of my own happiness. I took a quiet sip of my tea, feeling the gentle warmth spread down my throat. The golden sunlight wrapped around Maya and me like a soft, protective blanket. I had lost a toxic marriage, a fake family, and a life built on silent endurance. But in return, I had gained my voice, my dignity, my daughter's trust, and absolute peace of mind. I stood tall under the vast, golden Seattle sky, free, proud, and completely whole. All shadows must fade before the truth, and every pain is simply the start of a beautiful rebirth. Always remember, the right to write a new chapter of your life is forever in your hands. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below so we know we're walking this journey together. Hope to see you on the next page.